I've been thinking a lot about what collage means to me, what appeals to me about it. And I love other people's artwork. It's incredible to me that the world is filled and has been filled for thousands of years by incredible things made by other people.
Welcome to the Flying Fruit Bowl, a platform dedicated to the discussion and exploration of art and the creative process. I am the host and creator, Aaron S., and for this week's episode, I had a conversation with the amazing Jenny Lloyd. Jenny is an artist currently based in Amsterdam, whose work explores the limits of storytelling. Using both digital and analog collage, Jenny creates eclectic images that often remix and recontextualize the original source material to make new narratives. Okay, right. So I'll start where I start with everybody, which should just tell us a bit about yourself and how you became an artist.
So I'm originally from the UK, but I live in Amsterdam. When I was young, my mom was very busy, and she gave me a lot of books to amuse myself with. Loads and loads and loads of fiction books, story books, but also she had a bunch of really beautiful picture books. She had like a little pocket guide to like mushrooms, things like that, just little things and bigger ones as well. And I was absolutely obsessed with them. I would just like any book I could get my hands on, I would like sit on the floor and just turn the pages and just look at all the pictures. It was like my favorite thing to do. I was completely obsessed. And I think it just got into my head really, really early. And I didn't realize that you could, my whole childhood, I just didn't really realize that that could be your job, that you could make pictures for books, that I didn't really connect the idea that people, the pictures that you saw everywhere all around you, that someone made them. And then I went to high school. I did really love drawing and art at primary school, junior school. But then I went to high school and you could have a choice to take art. And I was like, of course, that's like a no-brainer for me because I really loved it. And then I had a couple of really amazing art teachers, and they were like, yeah, you can just do this. And I was like, what? And I was like, okay, I'm going to be an illustrator. So then I was like, well, that's what I'm going to do. And no one really argued with me about it. So I just did, that's what I aimed for. And I did a bachelor's degree in illustration at what was then Falmouth College of Arts, but is now University College of Falmouth, I think. And yeah, and then I graduated and I was like, wow, it's really hard to get work. And then I did a bunch of, I was lucky enough to get an agent in New York at the time. And we did like a New York trip at the end of our third year as part of our professional practice. And I completely lucked out with a piece I'd made, which was actually a digital collage piece. I was just getting into digital at that time. Adobe Photoshop 7 or something, I think, like 20 years
Wow.
ago. It's unreal, yeah. Yeah, he really liked this one piece and got me a couple of book cover commissions. And then I just kind of slowly took off from there. I had a lot of jobs tending bars, in restaurants, in offices, working in the finance industry, you know, like most artists. It's really hard to just do art, especially when you just graduate at like 20, 21 or whatever. And then I got into, it's a really long story, but I basically got into like corporate art and design at a skincare company in London around 2013 when I moved back from Ireland. And yeah, it started in like corporate graphic design, which was an experience. I learned a lot. I wouldn't do that now if I had the choice. Also, the beauty industry is terrible. But yeah, I learned a lot and about what I didn't want to do as well as what I wanted to do. And I had the opportunity to move to Amsterdam. Yeah, and I came here. And first I was just doing odd jobs, social media for people, branding, logo design, that kind of thing. I'm pretty confident in all of those kinds of things. And that's mostly what I've done in the last 10 years, graphic design work. It's the most regular, not always the most lucrative, but for sure the most regular work. And then the Corona pandemic hit, and as as an independent artist in the Netherlands, you basically, when you get here, you set up your own business. You have like a small business, it costs you like €50, and then you pay all your taxes and stuff through that. And so you're not employed, you're just employed by yourself, basically. You're really self-employed rather than like freelance. And and when the coronavirus hit and I lost my clients because they were like restaurants or businesses in the city that had to be open in order to function, we got like a payment from the Dutch government called the Tffb, which was basically like UBI. It basically was like universal basic income. You got like €1,300 a month to pay your rent, and also to just be able to live while you weren't working. And that went on for like nearly 18 months, because we were in lockdown for a long time, way longer than the UK, and much more severe lockdowns. So my friends in London were partying and I was still, not able to leave the house. And I was like, they were phoning me from parties and I was like, I'm so glad you guys are having a great time, but don't ask me what I'm doing because I'm just still at home. But I started to use digital collage in my artwork and start to investigate that, which was something I'd really loved when I was a teenager, making collage artwork, but I'd not really realized was a thing I could do. I kind of got into like drawing and painting and more traditional things, and I absolutely loved it. It changed my whole practice and the way I want to do things. And that was early 2020. Yeah, and so then about a year ago, I started deciding that with the rise of AI and NFTs and like things in the digital space becoming much more difficult to navigate and having a culture that I really don't like, I decided to start making analog work again. So just tearing up paper and and I've been doing that for a year now. And I've kept some my lovely small business clients, which is amazing, and that pays my rent. But in my private professional practice, I'm just, I guess, doing a lot more fine art than I was before, because I've always been a designer. First and foremost, I want to solve problems and I want to communicate, and that's the primary function of what I've always done. And now I'm trying to be a little bit more personally expressive, or a bit more playful, and a bit less literal, although that goes better and worse depending on the project I'm doing.
That's quite interesting, because you have a very nice balance of commercial and personal work. Like, it's actually quite nice, because a lot of the times, a lot of the artists I speak to either kind of just do one or the other, or like, it's very kind of obvious what their personal work is and their commercial work is. Do you kind of have that weird, interesting fine line between like your personal work could be your commercial work and vice versa?
I would love to have the work I most love to do be the thing that pays the bills. I'm already incredibly lucky to be able to be a designer for a living. I'm absolutely delighted. I have my own schedule. I only do what I want to. If I don't work for business. I only work for small ethical clients whose like business model I support. It's really important to me. But I would love to like be an independent artist, and I'm just about to start a Patreon. I'm just going to launch a Patreon in November. And I have a shop online that I've had for a while that just needs way more love and promotion. The problem is I have all these things made. I'm really good at starting a project and finishing it. I have a box of like handmade jewelry. I have like dozens of like postcard sets, and I just haven't managed to do the business part of putting them online. So I just need to do all of that. So if this, when this is out, all of that stuff will be ready, which is really exciting. I've heard mixed reviews about how Patreon is going for people now, but we'll see.
My advice is you might as well try it, because even if you try it for 6 months and it doesn't work out, you can just stop it. It's not that big of a deal.
Fine. I like as a person, like I've been a designer for 20 years. I went through the 2008 crash and lost all of my clients who were like small publishers for whom I did book covers and things like that. And I was working in an architectural studio doing design and graphic design for them. And they were also having a really bad time. So, and you've got to be flexible. I just try everything and see what happens. There's nothing that lasts for like a long period of time. You just have to be super adaptable if you're going to be any kind of creative, I think.
That's actually really good advice, because I think we tend to forget that the place we're in now is not the place we're going to stay. Just because you might be creating work, you might be getting, say, like loads of gallery shows or having, a lot of selling a lot of paintings or whatever. That doesn't mean that's going to be the way forever. things come and go. That's a good point.
Yeah. And you can have a moment like trends change really fast. People are
Mm.
always interested in like the next new thing. There is a kind of a sort of an objectification of fetishization of like new graduates whose
Yeah,
work is incredible, but they're like it's sort of a fresh new talent thing. And I
yeah,
think sometimes they can get a little bit ground up and spit out by the beginnings of the career in an art industry because it is an industry. Like
mm.
I hate the idea of the free market, but it exists and we're in it and we got to pay our rent. So you have to like take note about what's happening around you and the possibility that you can still be creative while not completely like losing yourself to whatever it is that you get money for, you know?
Yeah.
And anyone who manages to do that is already extremely lucky. But of course, the dream is to just get paid to do exactly what you want and like be Rothko, you know, just
Absolutely.
hold yourself up and make incredible artwork that changed the world and have nobody bother you. But that's available to like 0.0001% of people. So
What would be your dream project?
I'm actually very excitingly sort of working on a dream project right now
Oh,
with
okay.
an author and a writer called Rachel Stephen. She's a novelist and she's made films and she's a creative and she's sort of an online witch. So she's working on what is effectively, it's kind of like an oracle deck, but it's for time management, specifically for people, creative people, people who struggle with managing their time or getting all their needs fulfilled, especially because she has ADHD, something which my partner has and most of my friends, because I think it's very common amongst creative people. And yeah, to kind of manage your time, get your needs fulfilled. So it's a 58 card deck and there's a different illustration on each one. So for every one, comes with a collage illustration and all the design work, which I'm also doing. So front and back cards. I would love to also do the book for the deck as well, but that's up in the air at the moment, depends on budget and production time
Mm.
and stuff. So, but it's a very slow process because obviously I do a few cards and then I invoice her and then it goes like that, you know, and
Yeah.
she's doing it in between all of her regular normal work that she does. She does story writing, narrative workshops, and yeah, and it's called the Constellation System, and we're gonna release the deck whenever it's ready.
Mm.
And it is a dream project. I would love. It's challenging, which is like really interesting to me. And I did have a little bit of a break over the summer, but gonna get back to it now. Yeah.
That's really cool. Like, I love that because it's like you
Yeah.
can put your own personal spin on something that's
Yeah.
somebody else's ideas as
So
well.
exciting. Yeah. And I really like her. I like her ideas. I like the way she thinks about the world. We're both like very left wing politically. So I try and bring as much energy as I can, not explicitly, but implicitly in the cards, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's my favorite, most important project that I'm doing right now. But who knows when that will come out because it's
Yeah.
a slow creative process for both of us.
But that's also an interesting way to work as well, because maybe you don't always necessarily work that slow. And I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, particularly in this current kind of society, like you're expected to work quickly and produce
Yeah,
things, you know, and then
yeah,
throw things out. So it's probably quite nice to actually have some time to sit down on a project that has no official deadline that you can actually sit down and really
yeah.
focus your energy on.
It's super nice. And that's the way that if I'm really making work just for me, that I definitely do. I'm doing October at the moment, which has been really fun. And I do Febrilage every year, at least I try.
Yes.
So that because otherwise I do get a little bit lost in the source. And like having a deadline does help me learn quicker and be more focused. But if I'm working on a big piece, then I'm just happy for it to take as long as it takes, you know? I
So
work pretty slowly, unfortunately. I've tried to speed up, but the work is just less good. So
yeah, I think that's the thing, though. I think the problem is that there's a temptation to speed up because you want to get as much out as possible so that more people can see it, quote
yeah,
unquote. However, I think working slowly gives you a sense of knowing what you're actually doing and who
yeah,
you are as an artist. I think sometimes
yeah,
that's a lot more valuable than just pumping out work.
yeah. If I don't take the time to look at my own pieces and figure out what's good about them, what I like about them, what unexpectedly other people might like about them, how they work compositionally or with color, or how they work narratively, or how they're appealing to an audience, or how they're emotionally appealing, and I don't look at other people's work and figure out all of the same things, then I'm like not learning at all and I'm just not getting better. And that's the most important thing to me, is that even though you might have more or less success, that you believe in yourself, that you're progressing and learning in some way, because
Absolutely.
things feel a little meaningless. Having worked in like a corporate kind of setting where you're just churning out things according to like a style Bible, according to someone else's instructions, it feels very, it's still a very privileged position to be in, but it does feel a little bit more like factory conveyor belt, push out the design work kind of thing. So yeah, I do think pretty quickly, but it takes me a while to make decisions. And sometimes that's a matter of confidence, and sometimes it's a matter of, if I'm constantly trying to do something different or think about things differently, then it's more challenging and it takes longer to make decisions because you're not connecting to instinct quite as quickly.
Yeah, not just that, like particularly if you're working analog, you have to think about what you're doing before you do it, because as soon as you put it down, you're not going to be able to take it back up.
Yeah. And the thing that's amazing about working digitally is that you have almost infinite resources. Like it's extraordinary what's available online at the Library of Congress or at Raw Pixel for free outside of copyright. The incredible things that people will put on Unsplash for you just to use for free. I always try and credit people as much as possible. And also, if I make any money, like I try and get some money back to the photographers and models that is in the digital work I make. But with analog work, it's just what's in my local thrift store. What can I get online for a reasonable price? What can I source anywhere? Like I'll go to like indie theater festivals and ask if they've got posters and bring great big sheets of paper home and just do whatever I can. And I love using packaging and coffee packaging and unexpected things to mix up with everything as well. But yeah, you are restricted. You're limited by what you have. So then the challenge is like, well, how much can I fit in the studio? How much paper can I own? Yeah. And how to keep a record of it and keep it like collected in a way that I know what I have or what I have access to.
Yeah, I think also, I think that's kind of an interesting idea of like, that's actually the great thing about art is that you don't have to have the best of everything. You can use what's around you.
No.
And I think somebody like yourself, like use the packaging, like you could use like a cereal box, for instance, like literally anything you have in the cupboard, it could become
Love
part
to
of your work.
upcycle. Yeah,
And I think that's
for
actually
sure.
really clever.
Yeah, I mean, also, if you've ever walked into an art shop, obviously they have to make their prices high so that their margins can pay the incredibly expensive rent they pay. But wow, it is so expensive. I could go into an art shop and just pay the equivalent of my rent and just come out with like really basic stuff. And you can get stuff cheaper online. But then the problem with that is if you're buying from Amazon or whatever, it's like, I'd prefer not to. I prefer to buy from small businesses when I can. But if I can go to the thrift store or just nick something, sometimes you see in the Netherlands, people will throw out like art catalogs or magazines. And I'm like, yoink, it's mine now. And just love to collect things and use whatever I can. I do definitely treat myself to like some nice paper or some beautiful tissue paper or, vintage book covers that I couldn't find here quite a lot. But my housemate and my partner know they just collect interesting looking things and leave them on my table for me. And I'm like, oh, I've been using
That's
like
cool.
my partner smokes, and so he has like a lot of long skin Rizzlers, and the packaging for those is amazing. It's really cool. So I've been using quite a lot of that in little pieces here and there as well.
So that's quite nice though, because it's like your work becomes quite unexpected. Like the materials themselves are just as much as the work itself.
Yeah, and of course, no one would know this looking at my pieces, but it means that there's like quite a lot of my daily life just in the little artwork. So in as much as when you buy art from any artist, there's a piece of themselves in there, definitely, and like more or less according to how they're working. But I kind of like I'm not a journaler or a scrapbooker or anything, but sometimes I'll put scraps in pieces and send them out into the world, and it's like a part of what's been hanging out in my house, and that's really fun to think about.
Yeah, that's really cool. Actually, that's a really nice idea. And so nice
Mm.
because you're right. It's almost like a document of your life without it being deliberate.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So, what is the biggest challenge of being an artist?
Whew, I think it's different for everybody. I think normally, like as a rule, I would say the biggest challenge being an artist is just monetizing the thing you love and paying your rent without burning out,
Hmm.
or and just being able to finance your life while doing what you love to do. But for me personally, on a more like esoteric level, I would say I have an existential crisis about every 2 to 3 months where I look back at my entire portfolio and what I've been doing, and I think, oh my God, what was I thinking?
Hmm.
Everything I've made is absolute crap. I hate everything I've done. I like have a real moment. I've got used to it now, so I know not to internalize it and let it floor me, or at least I'm trying to get better at that. But I just look back and I get major, not even imposter syndrome, but a complete lack of confidence. And what it is just me getting better. Like my eye gets better, my taste gets better, the way I look at things improves, and I learn more. And I look at my work and I can see all the flaws and things I would have done differently. And then your skills kind of like are always behind what you want to achieve, for me at
Yes.
least. In the moment I make a piece and I'm almost always really happy with it, unless I'm very short on time. I made a piece in an absolute panic yesterday and I posted it and I was like, wow, this is really bad. But quite a lot of people seem to like it, which is a big surprise to me. But it's also very traceable to me why it was bad, which is that I didn't have enough time and I made it in a panic without having the time to be thoughtful enough about it. But yeah, I have a whole crisis where I'm like, not what am I doing, because I love to do what I do, but is this going to work out? Is this sustainable? Um, am I going to get better? Am I bad?
Yeah.
And yeah, it just happens like quarterly, maybe even more often than that. And I just have a couple of days where I just look at everything I've done, and then I come around and I'm like, no, it's fine. Just keep going. Yeah, and then my skills catch up, and I have a moment where I'm like, oh, I got better. I can see. Oh shit, I made a really good pieces this week, and so it balances out. Yeah, but
Yeah.
because of the systems we live in, that's not rewarding except only for you inside your
Yeah.
own head and your own being. You don't get externally rewarded for that, unless you can monetize it, or you're seeking promo, or you manage to have a show or some kind of positive feedback. I will say as well that I don't think that imposter syndrome reduces with success.
Hmm.
At least that's not my experience. And I have talked to artists who have much more, I guess you would say, traditionally successful careers. And they still might look at a gallery show they're doing or did, or a part of their portfolio, and be like, what the hell am I doing? How have I managed to convince anyone that I'm good at this, And sometimes the more you get paid for something, you're like, oh, but why? So I think that it's really helpful to get external validation. We all crave validation, right? We all want positive feedback. And that's really important, especially if you're a creative, because you put yourself out there, you're making yourself vulnerable every time you make something. You're making yourself, if it's in any way personal, you're kind of being vulnerable. And that means if you don't get positive feedback, that's sort of devastating. I think not always, but to a lot of people. But but then if you're also successful, you can get major imposter syndrome feelings, where people seem to be giving you extraordinary money for what seems like for doing what you love, and that can also feel really weird. But in my opinion, it's just, I think we live in a time, and we have done for a really long time, where especially now with like the rise of AI, where people just don't see artists as important. Not
Mm.
everybody, but like systems, like arts education funding is always being slashed. Arts councils are getting less funding year on year. It's much harder to be an independent artist than it was when I started in like 2004, 2005. At least that's my opinion and my experience. And the system kind of tells you what you're doing isn't worth it. Like what you're doing isn't pointless. What you're doing isn't hard work. You're not really contributing to society. And that might not be most people's prevailing opinion, but it is obviously what you see online if you're on Twitter or anything like that, Reddit, whatever. And it's hard to do what you love and be told that it's useless. That's not something that happens every day all the time, but it's just a kind of a weird experience sometimes, for sure.
I completely agree, because the thing is that like you're creating art. Any artist is creating work with the idea that something's gonna happen with that at some point. It's not a case of like you're creating work because you fancy just doing it. It's like, well, hopefully at some point somebody will buy it, somebody will see it, somebody will like it, it will help you in some way for a further goal. I think being told, oh, this is not worth it, this is useless, particularly the pandemic, where it was like artists are like there was a whole kind of thing where like, oh, we don't need artists because of the pandemic. But actually, art is so damn important. I think the problem is that people aren't educated enough to realize how important art actually is.
I don't think people know what it's for or like why we do it. And particularly during the pandemic, I was like, are you not at home watching TV? Are you not constantly watching movies? Are you not watching all this incredible art that's on your screens? Like filmmaking, especially with the SAG-AFTRA disagreements. Obviously, I support the creators, no questions asked, always. But those writers being told, well, you don't deserve this money and we're going to replace you with AI or whatever it is, or you just don't deserve this money, or the actors just getting paid absolutely pennies because of streaming is not a sustainable way to run a business. It's like heinous. With the rise of AI art, people are like, well, I can just put a sentence into a machine and it makes pictures. So you guys are pointless. And it's like, wow. I think that there's a real misunderstanding about what art is, why people make it, what it's for, why people are driven to make it, and why it's important. Because it is, in the end, one of the things that distinguishes us from the animal kingdom, right? Like we as people, I think, we create for like a million different reasons. A lot of it is like to mark a place in time, it's like visual history basically. And history is really important. And the way people express themselves is part of their being, and the fabric of society is made up of people who should be expressing themselves, the way they want to. And without it, it's just such a horrible gray world, and there's nothing to do, guys. Like there's no movies. There's no television. Like there's no music. I don't understand why people are okay living without it.
Yeah, that's true though, because like when the whole pandemic and the whole art is unimportant, it's like, well, like, okay, let's take all the art away and see what you're doing sitting at home. You won't be doing anything.
No books, no movies. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that like I think what I do is really important to society, but I do think artists as a whole are incredibly important, or all of us together. The idea that no one writes anything new or makes new pictures for me to look at is just really scary to me personally.
It's quite sad, actually, I think.
Yeah, very sad.
What are your opinions of AI art, and especially like how do you think it is going to impact like the future of like traditional art?
I don't know how it's going to impact the future. Like it's already been here for a really long time, and it's already been in some ways a really useful thing for a lot of people. For example, like video game assets. If you're an indie dev and you're making a video game and you need a bunch of assets, but they all have to be slightly different from each other, AI has been like a million different trees. There's no way you want to pay an independent artist to do that, to do every single tree differently. I think that in places like that, it can be really useful. But the problem is it's just capitalism is the problem, because it's just going to be like used by the people with power and money to try and oppress everybody and threaten people who are doing the creative work and saying, well, you're so easily replaceable, make people feel disposable, make people feel that they can be replaced by machine learning. I wish that we could just look at it as a technology outside of the like financial social structures that we have, and be like, wow, this is so useful. Because I, as an independent artist, I can see so many ways that I could use it in my own practice, just feed my own work into it and see what comes out, and then mix and match that. But because especially like DALL-E and Midjourney and systems like that are created from artworks made by people who are not being credited, compensated in any way. Their work is just fed in there. No copyright doesn't matter, IP doesn't matter, and then it just like gets churned out in a way that like is completely soulless. It's a trend, it's another sort of it's a trend that's going to come and go, and people are going to be less interested in it and stop talking about it. But the problem is its existence in industry gives management and the owning class a lot of power to oppress people who otherwise would be making the things that the AI is now making. And it's just going to make everything look worse, because no one can make something better than a person. So you're always compromising. Like the AI learns from us. Like it's not going to make anything new. It's not innovative. I guess it's only as innovative as the people using it. It's only as innovative as the work that's being fed into it. Like I don't want to discount the rise of like fast fashion, for example, has been sort of like not counteracted, but what has happened alongside that is lots of people learning to knit and make their own clothes. And people will always do that because people want to be creative, and they look at fast fashion and they'll be like, but I could learn to make something so much better and more suitable myself. And like, I know a lot of people who just knit, or a lot of people who make rugs, or people who make their own clothes. And I think that's incredible and really important. You can't stop people from making things. So people are always going to make things, and some people are going to find a way to monetize that. So the idea that artists are going to disappear because of AI is completely ridiculous. But industry for sure is already harnessing the power these systems have to put people out of work 100%. It's terrible and I hate it. I'm a little bit less upset about it right now than I was a few months ago. But it comes around according to the conversation online. I'm extremely online. I'm online a lot, and I just stopped using Twitter because of so many reasons, but also because of the AI art conversation. And I've seen people make some really extraordinary things with it, but these are artists putting their own work into it and using it as a technology. Like I'm very pro technology. I love, I've always worked digitally until very recently. The reason I've been able to make a living doing design in any way is because I've just had my laptop with me wherever I've lived. I think this is like the 6th country I've lived, and I just bring it with me and I'm able to work anywhere. And that's what I always wanted, because traveling with a home art studio is impossible. So I'm really pro technology, but I'm concerned about it. Yeah, for sure. It doesn't look good though to me, but I mean, no, most mainstream AI art, but it's going to start looking better and better. So I'm interested to see where it goes. I'm sort of horribly fascinated,
Oh yeah, I think most people are, but I think also you're right. Like in terms of, you can tell for the most part that it's particularly when it comes to like the art side of things. Because I think there is like an AI art photography whole kind of subsection that is pretty scary for photographers, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, very scared that's really scary for photographers. You're a photographer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, really scary. Yeah, definitely.
But then I guess I think it depends on the angle you're coming at it from at, and I think also it just depends on the use. I think there's something, I don't know, there's something I find a little bit off-putting about people exhibiting work they've made with AI, or people,
Yeah.
that being their entire kind of career. I think for
Yeah,
me, that kind of puts me off slightly. It's not something that I wouldn't look into in terms of like featuring or whatever, but it also kind of puts me off slightly. Maybe I should
I
interview somebody who
totally
does that actually.
agree.
Um, but it's just a case of like there needs to be some kind of human creativity there because otherwise you are also just as soulless as the work you're creating if you're not
Yeah,
putting any personal input into the work. Maybe.
yeah. It it's not the same. The idea that writing a sentence and feeding it into a machine and it churning out a bunch of visual artifacts, the idea that that is the same as an artist sitting down and making an artwork is such a weird well, it's just a very surface interpretation of what art is.
Hmm.
It's not just art is not just or photography or filmmaking or anything is not just an aesthetic to decorate a surface, you know. It's should be like way more meaningful than that. um yeah, I mean, if you were gonna have like sort of art debates, that would probably be one of your spiciest ones, I
Hmm.
think. If you had an AI artist with a photographer and a
Yeah.
writer and a book cover illustrator and album art people, you that would be people will get mad for sure if that's what you're looking for. It would be an entertaining debate, I mean to say.
Hmm.
Or
That's a
maybe
good
they
idea
wouldn't
though.
get mad. I'm mad, but I also try and be nice about it. Like if
I'm about to
someone's
say,
like,
as long
"Oh,
as everybody's
I'm
yeah.
making like a lot of stuff in Midjourney," I'm like, "Good for you. I don't really want to know about it though, or we can talk about it. But I hope you're having a great time.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not art. I don't
Hmm.
think.
Fair enough. But the thing is that like
Yeah."
everyone's entitled to their opinion. It's just about being respectful with that opinion.
100%. 100%. Yeah. I would never be rude to anyone
Oh
about
yeah.
it unless they were rude to me first. But I haven't come
That
across that.
that is the retail way, that's for sure. You never be rude to
Yeah.
somebody unless they're rude to you, and then there's just
I mean,
all guns blazing.
As a British person who waited tables a lot and worked in a lot of bars, the best way to be rude is just be extremely polite to a level
Yes.
that people know that you're being rude, but they can't say anything about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. They know that you're kind of taking the piss, but yeah.
Yeah. What can I do about it here? All right.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about your work.
Sure.
So for those who may not be familiar with work, can you please describe it?
Oh my goodness. Um, so I guess that's such a complicated question for me. I guess what I do is I make collage illustrations, which is to say, I have a concept or an idea, and I use a collection of new and modern and vintage and all different kinds of materials to sort of build a world in every piece. So each piece has a little story. I have made abstract pieces that I really love, but then they end up being part of a series that ends up being part of a story because I guess I'm obsessed with storytelling and world building and creating like tiny universes,
Hmm.
basically. Um, I think there's a sort of an extended universe to my work. At least like year on year, I look back at what I've done and I'm like, oh, this is all part of the same world. But I don't specifically, I'm not a writer, so I don't specifically figure out, who are the characters in this universe or what happens. But every piece is like a little snapshot, I guess, of a story. And quite often that can be anything from how I'm feeling about something in the moment or something political, although I do, obviously everything is political. There's politics in everything, especially art. But if I do kind of make those messages like normally quite implicit. But I use a lot of symbols. Um, I use a lot of colors or structures or kinds of compositions that are meaningful to me, although I would definitely have to explain them to somebody else just viewing the piece. But I also I'm a person that very much believes in like death of the author. So whatever someone finds in my work is delightful to me, even
Hmm.
if it's completely different to what I intended or what I put into it. Like every reality is your own perception. So if you tell me my work is about this, then I'm really willing to accept that, you know. More recently, I've been trying to make a collage every day, which
Wow.
is challenging because it takes me a long time to make a piece. And I'm also had a busy month in October as well. But they are only tiny. They're like 4 inches or 10 centimeters square. And I can tell the ones I had to rush or not. But it's also, as a very meticulous, thoughtful, hyper perfectionist creator, something that I'm always trying to reel in a little bit with myself is just release things that I'm not 100% happy with, and move on to the next piece without becoming hypercritical or hyperfixated on the flaws in something that I've made. And that has helped a lot. Working with analog materials has helped me loosen up a lot, although I'm not nearly as intuitive as some artists I really love who will just put 2 things on a page and then come back and look at it and call it done. That's not me at all. I will absolutely, like, there is anywhere between like 5 and 300 layers on everything I make because I cannot stop. But at least with digital, I will just work for so long on one piece. I mean, also when you think about fine artists, though, sometimes it might take 6 months to create a painting. So I'm not in any way saying that what I do is anything approaching like that length of time. But I think collage as a medium, because you already have resources literally pre-existing, unless you're making your own fodder, which is a whole different kind of a mixed media style that I also really love, but which I do a little bit less of. Because you already have pre-existing visual materials already made, it's necessarily like can be a lot faster. So I try and make more work more quickly. So things like Febrillage or October is really useful to me. And I do really recommend those things, but I would say take them at your own pace. And if you don't want to work every day or you can't work every day, don't worry about it. I'm an illustrator, basically. I studied illustration. I always wanted to make picture books. And I kind of sort of decided against that idea early on in my career. But I think there's still a designer in my heart that just wants to communicate. I want to solve problems. I want to answer questions. I want to tell stories, you know? So that's basically what I do. I'm trying to be more like self-expressive and more like fine arty in my work. I'm putting heavy quotation marks around that because design and art has a massive overlap. But trying to be a little more intuitive and sometimes a little less literal and intentional, because I think my work can be a little literal sometimes, and I could maybe be a bit more mysterious. But I also I like to be understood too, so it's a balance.
Because that's the thing as well, like trying to make work that is too ambiguous, that kind of requires too much of the viewer's kind of contribution could also be a dangerous idea, or it could also fall a bit flat if people aren't paying that much attention to what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that there's a power in ambiguity because you leave things more open for the viewer to participate. So I do really value people who make very mysterious, enigmatic work or very personal work that needs to be explained, but then I think as the artist, it's smarter then to be okay with people quote unquote misinterpreting or interpreting things differently than you intended. And then the more direct you are, the more likely it is you're going to be understood. Your intentions are going to be understood. And that's the same with anything, with like conversation or any kind of communication. The more direct and intentional you are, the more likely you are to be understood. And the vaguer you are, the easier it is for you to leave the other person space to interpret what it is you've done or said or presented to them, which is interesting to me. I've tended to be very literal my whole career, especially when you do book covers and stuff. You have a story to illustrate. You have to encapsulate that story in what is essentially a really small visual space.
Yeah.
And so being a really direct communicator is very important. But as an artist, you can answer whole different questions about self-expression and intuitive work. And I'm trying to loosen up and be a bit less of a designer, although I have designer brain, so I'm always gonna be that way.
I think the fact that you are a designer and an illustrator, I think that is very evident in your work, and I think that's actually what makes your work stand out, as opposed to like
Thank
because
you.
because the thing about collage, I mean, it's interesting to me because I actually really love collage. I didn't used to back in the
Mm,
day. I used to really hate it like a long, long time ago. 'Cause
I totally understand.
I think because John Steziker was like the bar, and because of that, everyone was like, "Oh, he's not a photographer; he's an artist." And there was a whole debate. I just can
Mm,
imagine. So for the longest time, I didn't hate college, but I didn't really understand it. Whereas in now, I absolutely love college. I feel like it's one of the most underappreciated mediums in the art
I
spectrum.
agree.
And I want to ask
Yeah.
you about that in terms of like, do you think that college is seen as a lesser form of art?
Um, yes. Briefly, yes. I think that people I think it's a little bit of an underdog, particularly because it has its roots, at least if we're talking about like modern day collage, it has its roots in like Dadaism,
Hmm.
and in the punk movement of, anywhere between like the 1950s and the 1970s. And I don't think a lot of people understand the Dadaists or what they were trying to do. I mean, just in mainstream conversation, I
Hmm.
don't mean
Yeah.
people who've gone to art school or people who are interested in art. Obviously, like it's an um, extremely important like art movement, one of the most important, especially in the 20th century. But in terms of its sort of mainstream appeal, it doesn't have the same cachet as like pop art
Yeah.
or the Gilded Age or any of another myriad kind of art movements. And because it's undervalued, that means it's underappreciated. At the core of how we as humans like live our lives, right? We take memories, we take things from the past that we love, we take our experiences and we patchwork them all together into a kind of an identity and into a sort of a vision of future for the selves that gives us meaning. And I don't mean to be like super pretentious about it or anything, but I've been thinking a lot about what collage means to me, what appeals to me about it. And I love other people's artwork. It's incredible to me that the world is filled and has been filled for thousands of years by incredible things made by other people. I have an obsession. I have a massive digital visual library that I just collect obsessively on like my on a 4 terabyte external hard drive that
Wow.
I just spend a lot of time also researching and collecting materials, and it really scratches a sort of organization librarian sort of part of my brain. And I think collage artists often are sort of collators of material, collectors, um, really interested in visual culture, interested in combining different things together to make a new thing. And it's really interesting how you can take someone else's work and bring new meaning to it, or just work or like visual material that might otherwise be uh, discarded, just thrown away or
Mhm.
not noticed. And then you can put that in a frame and say, this is important. And people will believe you because you've put it in a gallery context or you've put it online in a context where you're telling people are important. And that's really interesting to me because what we look at only has the importance of what we give it, the value that
Yes.
we give it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really a shame that collage art is underappreciated. But I also think that because of that, because it's a little bit of an underdog, people are less likely to tell you how to do it.
Hmm.
There isn't so much of, at least this is my experience, there's less of a feeling of like the movements of the of the market, of the industry, of the market dictating what's the trend, what you should
Hmm.
do, what works, what doesn't work. There are definitely trends that I see come and go. And there are types of collage that I absolutely love that I don't do. And obviously, it has like an infinite number of variations, just the way painting or drawing has. But I also like to sort of be part of a movement that has less of a sort of control from above, I guess. It feels a little more grassroots to me. Like, and it's also the thing I most love about it is its accessibility, because even someone who thinks they can't paint or they can't draw, they're not creative, even though I believe everybody is creative, like all humanity is creative, that anybody can stick two pieces of paper together and call it art. And I love that. I think it should be available to everybody. And some people find they're unexpectedly good at it. And I love that, you know?
I think that's also the reason why a lot of people don't like collages, because they're just like, you know, our people
Yeah.
are just sticking stuff together and selling it. And
Yeah.
it's not that at all.
It's
So I
just
think,
snobbiness.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think the thing for me, like why I think collage is fascinating, I think what I've learned over the years, especially talking to collage artists, is that it's really an interesting way to, as you said, like recontextualize the world, but also like your own personal viewpoint from other people's work. And also just the fact that, you
Yeah.
know, there are so many possibilities, there's so many juxtapositions, there's so many, you know, kind of visual things you can say. And it's like down to you as a person creating the work, especially analog collage, to
Mm.
interpret that in the way that you see fit. And it's kind of funny because like there's a question I'm going to ask you later, but it's funny for me like that people actually finish a collage, because it's like it's never ending. You know, you can there's so many layers and there's so many kind of ideas. And also it's interesting because a marker of time, because when you first start that collage, you're a very different person by the time you finish it. And like
Mm-hmm.
that whole collage, every piece of work, and I guess with art in general, every piece of work is a document of you changing in time as a person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's also interesting because, you know, with collage, you can just add a little something, you know, add a little bit more to it every day. You know, you can make a
Yeah.
piece within 365 days, add
Yeah.
a piece every day. Might be a nice project, you know.
No,
So
totally. Absolutely. I think that's really interesting and really true. And I also, the thing about, another thing I love about collage is you can literally combine things that you could never create yourself. Like
yeah,
there is no way for me to recreate a 1905 Japanese portrait of like a young Meiko, like a geisha, with
mm,
the kind of film that they were using. I don't have the finances to go to Japan, and even if I did, recreating that seems so orientalist and a weird thing to
yeah,
do. But I have access to those incredible photographs, and I have access to like 14th century medieval manuscripts done by monks who spent all of their time getting extremely good at a craft that I not only don't really have access to in the same way, but could never dedicate that amount of
mm,
time to. And putting those two things together and then combining them makes a thing that you couldn't do any other way.
yeah,
Like if you're
yeah.
I used to be a painter when I was a teenager. In fact, the first few pieces of work I sold were all paintings.
Wow.
And but I realized that at the time, that painting is beautiful and I love to do it. And I love a lot of painters. And it's probably the most, apart from photography as well, it's the most like elevated, celebrated art form that there has ever been. You know,
Mm,
like
yeah,
when people think of art, they think of paintings.
yes.
Um, but you can recreate a painting quite precisely. Like you can copy the work of great masters. You can copy someone's style in a painting, and I absolutely love the idea of counterfeit art. I find it really fascinating, like the history behind it, and the people that do like counterfeit art are extremely clever and very talented. I think it's amazing and really interesting. But with collage, unless you have exactly the same resources, it's so hard to exactly recreate someone else's work. And that's also really interesting to me.
I think it's actually a really good point with the idea of like collage, because it revolves so much time and so many different resources and so many different kind of elements. It
Mm,
would be extremely hard to replicate, and it's not even just that. It's a case of like it's not that painting isn't, but it's so much more personal to the artist creating it, because it's what
mm,
you think is going to go together, what you feel. Because as you said, there are no rules. There's no one telling you
no,
what to do and what
yeah,
not to do. You know, I actually really love the fact that even though, as you said, there are trends in collage art, and you kind of see when you look at a lot of collage art, but also like everything is so different. I'm constantly surprised by collage artists and kind of just like the interesting things they put together, and I'm like, this is
yeah.
such a good idea. It's just,
It,
it's just amazing.
yeah. It's really as well because obviously there's been collage art forever. People have been taking things and putting them together and making visual artifacts out of them forever. But there is a sort of a rapid growth in collage art that I think has been going on in the last 10 years with the rise of like being able to see each other's work digitally because it's a medium that's so underrepresented in the wider art market, so in galleries and in magazines and anywhere that someone might come across visual art. The place where I mostly see it is online, so that's Instagram or Pinterest or Behance or ArtStation or wherever you're looking at art. That can be anywhere, and because we have access to look at each other's work online all the time, we learn from each other really, really rapidly, and we're inspired and influenced from each other really, really rapidly. And it means like it has a real fast moving, fast growing freshness to it, where I'm seeing collage art now on, say, somewhere like Pinterest, which has its own problems with credit because no one on there is credited. But if you are just, you can obviously do a reverse. I always just do a reverse image search and make a note of everything I find and then go follow those artists on whatever platforms I can find them on. So for me, it's a great discovery tool. And if you looked at like collage on Pinterest, like even 10 years ago, the breadth and richness of what was available was like way less. And now there's so much more available, so much more to look at. You can see what other people are doing, what incredible photographers are doing, making collages of their own art or making collages of other people's art, or two photographers working together, that kind of thing. So fascinating. It's like I love people collaborating on collage art is incredible because it's like a conversation between two people. One person puts something down, another person puts something down, and they're like, it's like a call and response, and that's really fascinating to me. It's a real personal experience, to do that with somebody, and that's can be a little bit more difficult to do with like painting and drawing, I think, as well.
It makes me really want to create like a really nice thick like coffee table book full of collage artists.
Oh
I
yeah.
would love to do something like that because I
Oh
really want to
yeah.
create because I really want to create a thick coffee table book of like for art for the Flying Free Bar. It's like an annual or something. It's been on mine for a
mm,
long time. I'm one for photography. It's been
mm,
on mine for a long time. I mean, it's one of my
mm.
goals to do in the next 3 to 5 years, or at least some point in my life. But like for collage artists, that'd be beautiful. It doesn't have to be like a thick table, but just like even like I'm thinking about nowadays, like doing a magazine or something nowadays. I'm thinking about these things all the time.
Yeah.
Give myself more work, but like I'm thinking of something physical because I feel like we need something physical. We just don't have
Yeah.
enough physical things. Maybe collage art would be perfect because it would be like, oh, I don't know. I'm going to think about that. I'm clear about that down.
Definitely. I
Collage
will
art.
say, if you're going to make a collage art book and sell it to collage artists, be prepared for them to rip it up and stick it back together and send it back to you. But that could also be such a fascinating thing
Yeah,
to
that
do.
could be like
You
a
could
whole
have like
project in itself.
tearaway pages to invite people to uh, the artists of the book and other artists to stick all of those different things together and send them back to you. And that'd be a really good way of
Yes,
promoting it as well.
that should be a really good project and exhibit that project. That'd be so good.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, I really wish I had. The thing is, I really wish I did this full time and I had like the funds to do so many cool projects.
Yeah.
So there's just so
Yeah,
many
of
cool artists
course.
that I see, and I'm like, I would love to give you an exhibition. You deserve a
Yeah.
show. So annoying because I don't obviously I have a full time job. I can't be doing that. So, it's really annoying sometimes because like, and I guess it's the same with artists anyway. Like you have all these ideas that you would love to
Yeah.
do. You just don't have the
Yeah.
finances for them. You don't have the
No.
resources for them.
And like, yeah, you also, if you're freelance or you're running a small business just for yourself, uh you can never get to the end of work.
Mm.
I don't get to the end of my working day and think, oh,
Yeah,
I'm done. I look at all the things I want to do and still have to do, and client work I need to do, and personal work and ideas I have. And I'm literally never done. I'm never going to be done. Like,
yeah,
there's no chance of me retiring at any point and
yeah,
being like, oh, I'm done now.
yeah.
Absolutely no way. Um,
That's
so
yeah, that's a good point
yeah,
actually.
I do miss getting to the end of a working day and being like, great, my emails are off, I've turned my work phone off, no one's going to call me now, I'm done, this is my personal social lifetime. that is
Mm.
not that's not how I live.
I think that's such a good point in terms of
um
like the lifestyle and slash kind of like routine as an artist in terms of like you're
yeah.
constantly working. there is
Yeah.
never an off switch, because even when you might have like a day off, or you might be like, socializing, whatever, you're still,
Mm.
that's whatever you're doing is going to filter into your work at some point.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not like you're even unconsciously, not, might not be like physically working, but your mind is still working for you.
Yeah. There's a big pressure as well, because you obviously everyone feels like this, but you never quite have enough resources, even
Mm.
if you're doing better than you used to. That even if you're socializing and someone asks what you do and you tell them, if they want to see your work, then you're working. You're doing a little bit of self
Yeah,
promotion. You're doing a little bit of networking, and maybe you went to a rave and it's 3
yeah,
a.m. But you're like explaining what you do, and that is work. I'm like,
yeah,
oh wait, let me switch into like my elevator pitch for like
yeah,
5 minutes, and I'm not good at that because I just want to get to know people and be friends with people. And self promotion is such a weird feeling to me, and I'm not. I hopefully I'm not annoying when I do it, but I like a lot of artists feel really weird about like
mm,
talking about my own stuff in a way that when I've had like a waiting job or like an office job or a finance job, I would happily talk to a stranger about how my day was, you know.
mm.
But that feels like a release because what you're doing is someone else's work, not talking about something that you love, that you're invested in, that you created, that you're trying to do. And that can
Yeah,
be a really weird thing. I mean,
yeah,
just walking around, I'm a person that will just suddenly stop in the middle of the street and get my phone out, and a friend will be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I had an idea. I looked at
yeah,
something and I had an idea, and I'm sorry, I have to write it down because it will be gone."
yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
That's cool though, but that's the perfect thing, because it means that no matter what you're doing, again, there's a problem because there's no off switch, but no matter what you're doing, it's going to influence your work. I think
yeah,
that's the beauty of art, is that art is, as I keep saying all the time, art is an externalization of the internal mind. Everything
mm,
you are filters through your work in some way or another, whether it's conscious or not. And I think that's kind of the beauty of creating art, and the beauty of being able to see art, and the beauty of being able to talk to artists, is that you get to know about them on so many different levels. It's really interesting
yeah,
for me. I think it's why I
yeah,
probably like art so much, because people are interesting when you get to actually want to know them.
yeah. Everyone is interesting. Um, everyone is weird. Nobody is normal.
Mm.
The more you get to know people, the more you realize that the idea of like a normal person doesn't exist. We're all really weird. And I think um, artists have a drive to communicate that with the world. You know that there's not many artists that are like, what I want to do is just not stand out from the crowd and be accepted as part of a herd. Most artists want to create something unique or unusual or extraordinary, and whether or not they're succeeding at that, that's often the drive.
Yeah.
I think we're driven to sort of communicate the weirdness inside us in a way that other people might be taught to suppress. Um,
I love
and it's
that.
not that artists are more interesting than people who have a more regular way of living their lives, but only that we've been given the privilege and opportunity or the drive to express what's inside us, you know? Um, and that's more specific to artists than I would say with designers who are really skilled at communicating other people's ideas, you know? But also there's a piece of yourself in everything that you make, I
Mm.
think. So there's no getting away from that, whatever you do.
So, are there any trends in collage art that you don't like?
That I don't like. No, I don't think so. I no, I really try for that not to be the case. I might look at some pieces and I think that's either a more successful, in my opinion, or not successful example of what this artist is trying to do.
Mm.
But I like all kinds of collage art. I think that it's like music, for example, right? There may be things that you are more or less connected to, that you're more or less drawn to, that you're more or less used to. But if any genre I learn about, I start to enjoy more, whether that's noise music or drone music or jazz or whatever that is. If you start to learn about something and you're more exposed to it, you might like it more or less than other trends. And there's nothing wrong with not liking something. Like, not liking things is really important. It's really important to know what you don't like. But the more I learn about something, the more likely I am to like it, because I can see the intention of the artist and what they're trying to do. And I think a lot of people are just making collage art for like fun and creativity and release. And it doesn't have to be good. Like, making bad art is really important. Everybody should be able to do it. There's nothing wrong with it. There's lots of like bad art I really, really love and really enjoy and really like. So I would say no. I have preferences for certain trends, but I don't think I've ever looked at a specific genre of collage art and said, I don't like anything made in this style. Never. I might be like, oh, some people are doing this more successfully than others, in my opinion, just for me, in my opinion. But no, I love all kinds of collage art. I don't always love every piece, but I love all kinds of it for sure. But same with most genres of art, to be honest. I don't think there's a style of painting that I'm like, I universally despise everything made in this style. I think just I'm more drawn to some genres more than others and some artists more than others. But and it's not that I like everything I look at, but that I like all different kinds of collage art. I mean, who knows? I have seen some AI collage art I didn't like, but that's like the conversation we just had, It brings in a
that's
lot of
because
different
the way it
things.
was created isn't exactly,
Yeah.
doesn't give the work itself a lot of meaning or a lot
No.
of life, I think I'd say, probably, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
So talking about style, actually, like your work is really interesting because it actually has changed a bit here and there. Because obviously the stuff you're doing for Tffb is very different. I can't how you say it.
Yeah.
It's very different from what's on your website, for instance, which is very different from like your client work. Like, do you
Yeah.
think you have a visual style?
I think I do, because it's difficult, because I just started integrating collage work into my portfolio really only like 3 years ago. I'm still learning to find a place where everything I make has a thread running through it. But I do have 3 digital pieces tagged on my Instagram that are my most popular and successful and the most emblematic of what I was doing a couple of years ago. And I think they're very successful. And I have those up there as a kind of like a showpiece. And the rest of my Instagram is like what I'm learning, what I'm doing today, what I'm working on, even though it's presented in quite a more formal, this is the piece I made today, rather than like works in progress or like shots of my studio or anything. It's like, it's not super personal in that way, but it is like you can see the learning curve more clearly on my Instagram than you can anywhere else, for sure. I'm just trying new things, working things out. There's a thread that runs through my work aesthetically, which is just like there's a million things going on, and sometimes you don't know what to look at, which is both a strength and a weakness of my style. I've tried to make minimal pieces, and I really admire artists who make incredible minimal work, but it's not for me. I love a million things to be visible at once. Like, my living room and my studio is the same. There's just 100 things everywhere. I've got like 40 plants. We've got so many books. It's just I like to look at things. Visual clutter. I like to look at things. Yeah.
Are there what? Sorry, continue.
I was just going to say, I guess the thread that runs through it is that, like I said earlier, I like to tell stories. So there's always like hopefully a little narrative going on in each piece. Something's happening. There's like characters, there's a little world. I think that that's what runs through all of it. Yeah. Otherwise, just a real eclectic mixture of different things, like hundreds of years old vintage materials, antique materials, packaging that was just created yesterday, all of that mixed together.
So when it
Yeah.
comes to storytelling in your work, like how important is it for the context of your work to be understood? Like, do you feel the need to tell people the story, or do you prefer them to guess?
No, I'm super happy with people just looking at it and saying, "Oh, pretty," and moving on. That's also
Okay.
rewarding to me. I have no problem. Um, I have no problem with someone being like, "Oh, nice colors."
Hmm.
And in fact, that is, I think, most of the way that we look at things, especially if you're on social media, because more and more we're just scrolling by faster and faster, flicking through faster and faster. Um, it is really interesting to me how different people react when you have your work on the walls of a gallery.
Hmm.
And people will come and ask you about your work and ask you the meaning and symbolism behind it and ask you what you meant. And it's nice to know that for me that that's there. If anyone asks, I can be very explicit about what I meant and what I meant to say and what was happening. But also, I don't mean to say that every piece I make has any great deep meaning necessarily, but only that they're just like little vignettes
Yeah.
of a point in time or a collection of materials that are having a relationship with each other or whatever it is. But I have zero problem with someone just whizzing by and being like, "Oh, nice,
Hmm.
also awesome." Just having anyone look at anything I make is rewarding to me. I for sure it's really interesting when people want to talk to me about my work, but I'm also not super good at doing that. I'm trying to get better,
Hmm.
like explaining myself. Um, but also, I'm really happy for people to read into the work, whatever they're driven to. I think that's how human minds work. We're going to understand and perceive things through our own lens, and I don't want to prevent anyone from doing that.
So do you ever worry about like repetition of ideas or like imagery as you create more work?
No. Maybe I should, but
Not
no,
necessarily. No,
because
that could be
I
part of the style.
because yeah, the thing is that I'm actually trying to be a bit more consistent
Hmm.
stylistically. So I think actually the opposite. I look at my work and I think, wow, this is hella eclectic. Actually, I should try and narrow down a little bit and become a little bit more stylistically consistent. But the problem is, I like all kinds of things. And if I look at a table and it's covered with all different kinds of things, I find all of those things interesting and I want to put them all in one piece. And that necessarily means that everything has like a really slightly chaotic, sort of eclectic energy. Although things are really carefully composed on
Hmm.
my end, I can understand if they look a bit haphazard from a viewer, but that's also fine. So I think the opposite. I think I'm less worried about getting stuck in like a visual rut. I'm more concerned with how do I find a niche that's rewarding to me. And also, when people are only seeing my work once a week for zero point 0.2 seconds, how they recognize that that's a piece from me, that I
Hmm.
made that, and they emotionally connect with me and my style. Because if I want to make more work personally or do custom commissions for individual people or just make a more money on Patreon or whatever it is, I want people or I need people to personally connect with the work, and that means it probably needs to be a bit more consistent. um, but as I said, like Instagram for me is just a place where I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm posting, and it's different every day. So it's not the same as me on my portfolio website or what I would present if I was looking for gallery representation or agent representation. That's a whole different ball game, and I would be a lot more stylistically consistent with anything I presented in that kind of a way. Or if I was pitching for a design job for a new client or whatever, I would definitely choose a series of pieces that had more of a connection with each other, so it was more clear about my intentions and what I was trying to do.
Would you like to have an exhibition of your work?
I would love to, of course. Um, I haven't had a solo show for a really long time. We did an exhibition called Symbiosis in Amsterdam in 2021, and that was really exciting with some other artists, all different kinds of artwork. Um, and it was really wonderful to be part of that. But of course, I'd love a solo show. One thing about it though is my work is tends to be really small, at least
Hmm.
the analog work. I have big digital prints that are like 70 centimeters across. Um, yeah, and they worked pretty well in a gallery space, but also they look huge in my studio slash living room.
Hmm.
But on a gallery wall, they look really small. So my little 10 centimeter pieces need to be in quite big chunky frames, or they're small, so it's hard to know, or how much wall could I actually cover with these.
But then
But
you could have, it depends, it actually really would depend on how you display them, because like I think that'd be
absolutely.
really cool if you had like a shelf and you just had like them across the
Yeah.
shelf or something. Or like
No,
there's,
totally.
but I think because they're small, that gives you so many more options to display them. And that's actually really
Yeah.
interesting.
And I think a beauty of small work is that people have to get really close to it to see it. And something that I've noticed is that people, when they have like necessarily a physical proximity to your work, are literally having a more physical relationship
Hmm.
with it because they're closer to it. And then you can sort of speak to them more directly, I think. I do envy big, beautiful painted
Hmm.
canvases or huge, large format photographs that when you walk into a room, you're like, wow, this is extraordinary. But as a person who sort of became an artist because I'm interested in books where you're not really far away from the page, I think it makes sense that you have to get quite close to my pieces to have a relationship with them. So it's okay, but it's hard to know how big of a space do I actually have enough work to fill. I probably have more than I think. I have stacks of work. It's just hard to know how much of it there really is until you put it all together.
I was just thinking about how would I display your work. I'd probably like suspend it from the ceiling so that it's just like hanging, so it's hanging there rather
Yeah,
than be
that
on
would
the
be
wall
really
itself.
cool.
Or
Yeah, that
just
would be
in
really
a, or
cool.
in a way where like, as you said, people have to get closer because it's tiny, but also like that
Yeah.
there's a power in that as well though, because small work can also be
Definitely.
incredibly beautiful. And
No,
there's been a
thanks.
few times where I've been in a gallery. Actually, I was in a gallery in Manchester a couple of months ago when I was over there for a photography
Hmm.
trip. And I went to uh, um, Contemporary Six, I believe it's called, and they had a painter whose work I absolutely adore, Jen Orpin, I believe her name is. And her
Hmm.
work is gorgeous online. I see it all the time. It's the kind of work I love. It's like like paintings of highways, like really detailed. It's like
Wow.
tiny. I had no idea it was that small. And I saw it and I was like, this kind of makes me,
Amazing.
I was like, this makes me love it more because it's
Yeah.
tiny. I'm like, the amount of detail in such a small space,
No.
absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful. I saw it and I was like, this is so
Wow.
interesting. Also
Her
because you
name
can't
is
tell
her
online,
name is
can you?
Jen Orpin, you said?
Yes, Jen Open.
Okay, I'll
Yes.
remember that.
I'll send you the link because
Yeah,
I've got a list
please,
of artists I'm
please
going to send you
do.
anyway whilst we're talking. I've been
Oh
typing.
yes, please.
So,
Yes, I'd
I
love
love, as you
that.
can imagine, I love sending people different artists. Like the whole point of what I
Yeah,
do is just to
amazing.
share art. So, absolutely, will totally do that. I've already got a list here that I've been writing for the people that I've
Oh,
interviewed
fab.
slash know. So, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
please.
But yeah, so it's interesting how like you see a piece of work and because it's so small, you're like, oh, actually, this is gorgeous. And then you have to go really close to it, see all the details,
Yeah.
and like, so yeah, so
In
small
some
work is
ways,
powerful.
in some ways you can have a more we as humans have more personal relationship with things we're physically closer to.
Hmm.
And I do think sometimes if you're physically closer to something, you can have a little bit more of a personal connection with it. Um, and I that could be true of my work. I don't know. I haven't displayed a lot of super small pieces, so I normally with my digital work I was trying to print them as large as I could to
Hmm.
make as big an impact as I could, and some of those are still only 12 centimeters wide. But as an analog artist, I'm restricted if I'm using original materials. I'm restricted by the size of those materials. Like a
Hmm.
book page is only so big, and things start looking different if you're using small fragments in a big piece. They have a different impact than if they're in a small piece because they
Okay.
literally take up less space of the surface. Um, so I have made a bigger piece that I haven't shown anyone yet.
Wow.
I'm not sure about it. We'll
Fair
see.
enough.
I'm thinking about it. I made it in August, and it's in my bedroom, and I look at it sometimes, and I'm like, "Is this good? I don't know. We'll see." I'm thinking about it,
But I
but
think
I am thinking about making bigger pieces as well.
I always think that's a valuable lesson, though, the idea of making something and not showing people and sitting with
Mm,
it. I think the problem is like a lot of the time nowadays, especially, people just want everyone to see it, and it's like there
Yeah.
are pieces of work that you're not just going to be sure about, or you just might want to
Yeah.
keep for yourself, and there's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with that.
No, totally. Totally. And also, you are necessarily going to have a different relationship with a piece that you never intend to show anybody, or that you intend to just hang in your house. And maybe the people that know you that come over to your house will see it. There's definitely, and I think this must be the case with almost all artists, I would say, if you intend for other people to see your work, you necessarily have the audience in mind. Even if you try and deny that, or you try and not be affected by that, I think your subconscious knows that you're creating for an audience. You know, you're performing in a way, and that's completely different from people who are scrapbooking or journaling just for themselves. And that can feel really, there's a real power in seeing something that someone created only for themselves, that they didn't have they didn't anticipate that anyone else was going to see it, and that can be such an intimate experience. If you look at Da Vinci or Michelangelo's sketchbooks, it's by far and away the most interesting thing to look at when I go see an exhibition of their work. I love to see, because they had no idea that anyone else was ever going to see those pages, and that's such an interesting insight into the way that artist's brain works. Is what are they doing when they don't know that anyone is going to see it? And that's really interesting to me. Yeah. I'm aware that I create work for an audience, especially primarily as a designer, but I would love to also try and bring a kind of an intimate quality to my pieces, and have enough of myself in there, have enough confidence to think about myself more and the audience less, so that the audience can connect a little bit more directly emotionally with my work, for sure.
Sorry, I'm just thought about the idea, because you're talking about, you said book pages are only so big. Sorry, I'm listening to what I was saying. I was typing, so I was like, oh, it just made me think of
Yeah, of
something.
course.
Because you
Yeah,
said
no
book pages are
worries.
so big, it'd be really interesting if you got, like, say, I don't know, like, say 30 collage artists, maybe that might be an easier number, and you had them all do a collage on a book page, and then you
Yeah,
binded them all together into a book.
yeah.
That would be
That's an
cool.
amazing idea.
Or if you had like an empty book that I don't know how it would work like financially, but you had an empty book or some kind of book, and you shipped it to different artists. So
Oh, there's
like,
those. Let me show. Can I show you
yeah,
something?
yeah,
1 second.
absolutely.
Sorry, my studio drawers are a bit chaotic,
No.
but this is happening a lot in the collage community. This is an add and pass book. Anything goes. Add some paint, a scribble, a poem, a collage. Add a little or a lot, one page or many, good or bad. Mark your territory by leaving your name and address on the front and back cover. Pass off to the next contributor in person through the mail. So this is from Lindsay Stewart, who's an artist in Canada. I don't know her work, but I got this through like a collage meetup.
Oh, wow.
And it has like pages, beautiful pictures, and it's like a handmade book. There's collage art in here. And that's being passed around the world right now. So it's my turn to do a page or a couple of pages. And then I'm going to send it on to someone else. I think maybe someone in Germany.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of these going
Yeah,
around.
that's such a good idea. It's such a good
Yeah,
idea, because it's
yeah,
beautiful just to see like this really interesting, particularly international,
yeah,
like collaboration between
absolutely.
people around the world.
Yeah, this has Canadian artists in it, French artists, um, yeah, Dutch. So really interesting. And I know that there's a bunch of these going around.
Yeah.
There's also a way that people relate to a book. And I'm definitely going to do one of these, because I have some friends on Instagram that are making these amazing visual board books. Like one of my favorites is Scissors, Paper, Paste, Miranda Millwood. She makes
Yes, I
these
wrote her name down to give
incredible,
to you.
yeah.
Yes.
She's amazing, and she's a friend of mine online, and she makes these amazing board books from scraps and all different things. And there's a relationship, even though I haven't held one of her books in my hands, I've just seen them online. There's a relationship that you have with a book that's so different to work on a wall. And it is, as I said, like a more intimate relationship, because the viewer has to be active in turning the pages. So you have a physical relationship with the work. That's not the same as when you look at something on the wall of a gallery. You can be more or less passive according to how you're interacting with it. You know, like you can just look at it and not think about it and move on. If you have a book in your hands, I think you are drawn to looking at it a bit more carefully, you know, and that's something I'm really interested in, is making physical objects. You obviously, if you're going to exhibit physical objects, you necessarily have to be fine with them getting wear and tear from viewers.
Of course.
But I also think a lot of collage artists are already so interested in aged or distressed paper that sort of like something having its own life and having like fingerprints and page creases only makes something more beautiful, you know?
Yeah, it would add to the value of the work, or to the kind of
absolutely, yeah, because
the nature
then
of the
there's
work.
so like a fingerprint from somebody is like a mark that they were there, you know, like it becomes like a collaborative part of the physical object, which is really interesting to me.
Yes, Miranda's work is gorgeous.
Yeah, she's amazing.
I really wanted to interview her, and I still really want to. I'm trying to get her on board.
She's busy.
That's the thing, though. This is the thing about trying to interview people. There's another artist called Collage Garden whose work I absolutely adore. I wanted to interview her as well, and we planned it, and I've got her interview notes written up. We just haven't had the time to sort out a date, or just, I don't know if she's still interested anymore, to be fair. But I'll have to message her later, actually.
Oh, hit her up again. I was so happy when you came back to me and asked me again.
Oh, absolutely. So the thing is that, I just love talking to people. I love talking to artists, and there are just too many artists to talk to. That is the problem.
Yeah.
Like,
and never ending, always more every day.
I would love to do this full time, because I could easily just have a conversation every single day with an artist. It'd be so fun. Like, I would love to do this full time, which would be so fun. Just to travel around the world, meet artists in real life, interview them.
Yeah.
But I do not want to do that.
Wow, how would you do that?
I don't know.
How do we make that happen?
Oh, I really want that to happen so badly. But I think that's the goal, at least for now. But we'll see what happens, because life is life. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm enjoying what I do now, because I'm grateful that I can do what I do now. You know?
Yeah.
So, as
what
much
do
as
you do in your day job?
It's just a retail job. I just work at B&Q. So it's just a day job, which is perfect. And I'm lucky that I work I'm lucky because I work the morning shift, so I always have the evenings to do stuff. So I always do interviews after work because I can. You know.
I found that, well, when I was working in retail or service industry jobs, that because personally, and this was just my experience, it could be like very stressful in the moment, but you are done when you get home.
Yes, that's the thing. Yeah.
I would be like, I am so done. Like, even if there's like work politics or whatever at work, when you come home, unless you're super close with your colleagues, which is its own like question, right? And happens in every bar job, because your whole social life becomes the people that you work with. There is a kind of a beauty in just being like, oh, I'm done. And I don't know how that feels anymore. I mean, I remember how it feels, but
that's also the thing, because it must be hard, because you do want to just have those days where you're like, actually, you know what? I'm just going to go and hang out with friends, or I'm just going to go and sit and read a book, or I'm just going to jump on a train to a beach or something like that, where you just want to just switch off.
Yeah,
but it's hard.
I do that. I use video games for that, because they're really immersive, and it's very hard to distract me from them. And that means that my subconscious is doing whatever it's doing, but my conscious mind is not just passively consuming, but actively interacting. And I find that really restful in ways that like socializing or talking to people is, because you're having like a multi-sensory experience with you're still consuming a product, but you're having an experience with it rather than like passively engaging with something, you know? Not to say that people aren't actively engaging when they read a book, of course they are, or like watching a movie or whatever, but there's more active or passive ways to engage with media. And I do also have noise in my ears all the time, whether that's music or podcasts or YouTube videos or people talking about things. I just want to listen to people talk about things all day, and that is what I do. So I'm definitely not a person that's like, oh, I'm just going to sit in a quiet room and focus. I can't do that. My mind just goes completely. I have to have something in my ears while that's happening, for sure.
So do you think that the environment you live in filters through your work? Like, how does living in Amsterdam affect the work you create, or does it?
My lifestyle in Amsterdam definitely influences the work I create, in that I make enough money to cover my basic needs without having to do the London grind, which is what I was doing immediately
Yeah.
before this
Oh,
time. It's also all consuming because it takes so long to get anywhere. So if you have friends in London or you have jobs in London, the amount that I would just spend on the tube, it feels like half your life. And you can you can have more or less interesting things to do when you're commuting, but it is still just kind of time that you don't get back, that is just spent going from place to place. Amsterdam is really small. It's really easy to get places. The public transport here is amazing, but of course everyone also bikes. So it's really funny because if you invite an Amsterdammer to something more than 20 minutes away, they're like, no way. That's so far, so long. I couldn't possibly. I used to travel all the way from Essex to Ealing just to get a coffee with my friend, and it would take me like 2 hours,
that's
10
insane.
minutes just to get a coffee.
But I also understand, yeah, I also definitely, obviously, as somebody who doesn't live in London but has been to London many
Yeah.
times, I very much understand
Yeah.
that.
I mean, many cities are the same. Um, but so what I would say is that I have a lot more time. I have the absolute luxury and privilege of being able to make art and spend my time making art and not um, like being in the grind as much as I have been. And I also am not like working a steady job that is like overtime or like late at night or anything that I have also done before, hotel work or bar work or whatever that might be. I'm completely on my own schedule, and that changes the way I work in that means my work is better because I'm not creating in a panic, or I'm not a person that does very well under pressure. I have got better, but I think most people don't work well under huge degrees of stress. So for me, the less stress I have, the better my work is, I feel. Although of course if you're it helps to have a little bit of pressure or a really intense desire to finish something or do something or be self-motivated, but I like that. I prefer that to come internally, from inside myself. And I decide when the deadline is, or I have some very understanding clients that are just like, when do you think this could be done by? And I get to say, and that's amazing. That's amazing. Because I've had editorial jobs before. I did quite a lot of editorial work for the BBC Radio Times magazine. Wow. And they would call me on a Friday evening and say, can you have this done on Sunday for us to publish on Tuesday, but it has to go to the creative team on Monday. And I'm like, oh, what about my weekend though? Okay, I guess no weekend.
Yeah, that's the thing as well. Because, any work takes time to create. You know, and you want to create to the best of your ability of what you're creating. You're not here just to pump out work like a factory.
I don't send out bad work. I will always I will call a client and apologize profusely and work on it until it's good. I just don't. I mean, by my own standards.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, I might have had some clients who are like, well, this isn't good work, but hopefully not recently.
So I want to talk a bit about your creative process, if that's okay. So like, what is your creative process like? And do you have any particular routines that help you focus on your work?
It depends if I'm working digitally or with analog materials. I also do quite a lot of work on my analog work, not on the small pieces, but on the larger pieces in like post-production. So if I decide to make something into a t-shirt design, or if I upload it to an online shop or make digital materials from it, then that's a different process than if I'm just making the art from scratch. So it depends. So for Collectober, I knew I was going to be short on time, that I was been creating every day. I went back to the UK 2 weeks ago for my mom's birthday. So I knew that I was going to be away 5 days in the middle of it. And a friend of mine got married and all sorts of things have happened. So I knew I was always going to be behind. So what I did was I looked through all of the material I have in my drawers and on my shelves. And for each prompt, I collected together 5 or 6 pages of stuff that I thought would be relevant, either aesthetically interesting or thematically relevant. And I laid them all out on my work desk and just put them together with a little bit of masking tape at the edge and labeled it. And then I labeled it all the way from day 1 to day 31 from right to left, so that every time I made a collage, I could collect whatever I'd left for myself previously and use that, and a pile of just random materials. I've got an incredible Michel Basquiat book, which is amazing. A bunch of Gilded Age, Renaissance books, and piles of different kinds of tissue paper and all different kinds of materials that I just use all the time in a kind of constant stash next to me. And then I have the collection that matches the theme or prompt that I'm doing. And then I just work on that as I go along. In the last month, at the beginning, I was making 2 or 3 collages. I was working overnight when it's really quiet and I just have the place to myself, and I had a bit less client work. So I just took the time, I was able to take the time to just make those overnight, start at 8 p.m. and then just work all night on 2 or 3 pieces. More recently, it's been a lot more chaotic because I've had a lot more life stuff to do, and I've had client work, which has been amazing, but also cuts into my personal collage time.
Yeah, of course.
So more recently, I've been a bit more chaotic, just making a piece just in the afternoon and desperately trying to take a photo of it before the light gets too low. I didn't realize until Monday that the clocks had gone back. I got to 4:30 and I was like, it's so dark. How am I going to take a shot of this now? It just happened and I hadn't even realized it. It's what happens when you don't have a schedule or a job or anything arranged. My laptop and my phone just did it at 3 a.m. Sunday morning, and I was sleeping, so I didn't notice. And then I was like, whoa, why is it so dark? Yeah, bonkers. You would have thought after years I'd be used to it, but I'm still, no.
I don't think any of this
by surprise every time.
Because now you've just said that, I've just thought I need to remember next time I do an interview that the clocks were changed.
Yeah. Because we arranged this as well. I mean, I'm glad that they went back in the UK at the same time, because I had to double check, because we arranged this at 1 and I was like, oh, that's 2 my time. And then when I figured out our clocks had gone back, I was like, oh, is that still 1 then? So then I had to go back and So sometimes when I know I'm very short on time and I have time to prep, I will do quite a lot of prep and do organizing and set myself up the easiest way to create every day. But my normal process is just I have a list of ideas, and some of them are ideas for series and some of them are ideas for individual pieces. And then quite often I will go to the thrift store and just pick up a book and be like, wow, I just love everything in here, and tear everything up and kind of categorize it, and then make pieces just using mostly that. Or it's a bit chaotic. It really depends day to day. I'm trying to be a bit more intuitive and a bit less overthinky about things, because a little over analytical maybe, but you've got to play to your strengths as well, I think.
So how important is it for you to document the creative process of your work, and do you ever show the failed images?
It's not important to me at all to document the creative process. I do have a mobile stand, and I had planned to make my Instagram account, and I probably still will, because I'll have to do this for my Patreon anyway, a bit more personal, show what happens behind the scenes. But I'll be honest, that is for other people who might be interested. It's not really for me. I have quite a distinct memory of making every piece I make. So I could probably describe to you how I made any one piece, even though I make a lot of work, because what happens is I have a very personal relationship with that piece of work while I'm making it. So I kind of know what was going on in my life or my mind at the time, or what I was thinking about while I was making it. And that to me is more important than documenting the technical processes, because I don't really do anything super exciting. I'm still just scissors and a scalpel and glue. So I don't do anything very super interesting technically at the moment, or I haven't done for a little while. So it's not super important for me. Because I have the memory, when I look at each piece, I have the memory of how it was created in my own head. But I will start doing that for other people because I know other people are interested. And also, it's just really nice to watch a time lapse. It's very comforting to watch a time lapse of someone making a zine or making a piece. It's just really good, comforting, interesting content. So I'd be happy to make that. But we'll see. I don't want to do anything that I feel super uncomfortable with,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
or that is like really awkward, or I think times when I've been burned out on creating is when I've had to go against what I want to do for too long, and you lose focus of why you're doing things, or you just make stuff to put on Instagram rather than making things for yourself. So even when I'm making every day for like an Instagram challenge, a prompt challenge or whatever, I try and still stay true to like what I want to get from that and prioritize that, because otherwise you get burned out really quickly. It's hard to make 30 different pieces of work in a month, or like, I'm going to have a little rest when I'm done. I have some really good client work to do, so I use my professional work to take a rest from my personal stuff.
That's so dangerous because you're just constantly working. I mean, I understand what you mean, but like that is
I will say, I mean, I do, as I said, like Amsterdam is really nice for seeing friends. Everyone is very close together. I have a couple lovely friends that always are sending me invites to the really interesting things to do. So I am more often extremely lucky to be able to just turn stuff down. So I'll just start accepting more invites to do stuff outside the house. Although the weather is bad here, so
but
I
say
might
it is
just stay
also
in with
winter,
a blanket
so
instead.
I'll just stay at home, with limited cups of tea. I'm much rather doing that.
I had a mad summer, to be honest. So I'm happy to stay in and just make some things.
I think also the problem is, talking about like time lapses, the problem with artists especially is that it becomes less about creating and more content creation, and that's the issue.
Yeah. I don't want to think of, well, I don't mind thinking of some of what I make as content if it's apart from the art. Like, obviously, if you're running a business, you have stuff that's to do with the business that's not stuff to do with the art. And I think it's important to think of the content creation as part of the business thing and not part of the art thing. Because to me, the creation of the content is business. Like, it's art as well, but letting the creation of your content dictate your art is like a fast way to burn out, I think. Some people are more successful at it than others, but if you can't be yourself online, what are you even doing? Like, it's really tough. It can be more successful for like YouTubers and stuff and podcasters, but if you're making visual art, people want to know you, they
absolutely
they might want to know a version of you, and you might not want to tell them everything, but they if people connect with you, they do mean it, normally.
Unless, I mean, it depends, unless the whole mystery of who you are is part of the work itself, because there's a lot of artists who have aliases, or that's part of their whole kind of
absolutely
persona.
I've noticed that happens much more commonly with men than it does with women, or at least I should say like masculine presenting people than it does with femme presenting people. And I think there's a whole conversation to be had about how femme people are socialized to connect more directly and personally with our audiences, whereas like masc presenting people are more, there's a kind of a glamour about being mysterious or enigmatic or being like the genius in the attic, or you know what I mean, like
that's an interesting conversation.
I could talk for days just about that alone, to be honest. So I love it, and I'm quite surprised when I find out the alias of an artist is a female an artist, or a trans artist, or a femme presenting non-binary artist, or whatever, just you're not traditional kind of masculine presenting person, because that's so interesting to me that you would take the route that we're kind of told not to take to like create the art, let the art speak for itself, because there's a lot of pressure as female artists to communicate your face, your personality, and I'm not really into it, although I think it might be necessary for me to grow my presence. And it's just something I'm going to have to get used to. It's not that like I ever would say anything inauthentic or pretend to be somebody else, just that I'm
Yeah,
not really interested in my face being on the internet like that. But also,
yeah.
it's okay if it needs to be.
So many
Yeah.
artists, so many artists, so many artists are exactly the same way.
Yeah.
The amount of times I've asked somebody for an interview and they're like, "Do I have to be on video?" And I'm like,
Mm.
"I prefer it, but you don't have to." And if you're
No,
not
of
comfortable with
course.
it, that's fine by me. But
Yeah.
I would prefer it. And they're just like, "Oh no, it's fine. I don't want to do it." And I'm like, "That's fine.
Yeah.
That's not a problem for me." It's one of them where like be as comfortable as you want to be, but also the problem is because you're selling a product and you're selling, your work and your personality within the work, people do want to understand who the person is behind that work
Yeah, they
because,
do.
that's just the way people are. And I can understand
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and you can sort of try and reject it, and I have tried to do that for so long, but then I realized that the people whose Patreons that I'm a member of, the people whose work I look at the most and refeature the most or repost the most are people whose faces I've seen and who I have some kind of personal relationship
Mm,
with, even if it's
yeah.
only online. And I'm like, well, if I benefit from that from other people, then in order to like grow your platform, you sort of have to be known. Not necessarily you have to be,
Mm.
but it can help. It
You have
can
to be
help.
present.
Yeah.
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 People
I,
love to put like, a face to the name.
yeah. And I think the way to not get super frustrated and really burned out on something like Instagram or Twitter or social media or wherever you share your art is to develop really good personal relationships on there. The algorithm isn't designed to make you do that. The algorithm doesn't want you to do that. The algorithm just wants you to constantly consume new content all the time from new people. Um, it's not designed for you to have deep personal like DMs with people really. And
Mm,
I sort of like to like use Instagram in a way that it's not intended in a way to just
yeah.
have really, really interesting chats or personal chats with other artists I admire who become friends then online.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So then if I'm already doing that, it's not such a big step to take videos of myself and my process and put them on Patreon. So I think that's what I'll do.
Would you ever consider creating like videos or reels showcasing like the selection and the process of finding source materials? I think that's something a lot of college artists struggle with.
Yeah, I would love to. The thing about finding source materials is I would have to be super careful not showing anyone else in the video. Like if I go to a thrift store, they're normally full of people who don't consent to being on camera. So I want to be really careful about like, but you could totally do a close up scroll through a bookshelf or something.
Mm,
Um, I would just love to get better at cinematography, basically video taking. And it's just something that you do as you learn. So we'll
of
do
course.
that. Yeah.
Or even if
Um,
you have gone to a thrift store and you've got books, like sit down with those books and talk about why you've chosen these books or what images you're interested in
Yeah,
or what would
that
you
would
do
be
from
that
that.
would be yeah, that would be something I would definitely consider. There's another amazing artist online, Kim Hamburg, Glue Paper Scissors. I think it's Glue Paper Scissors. And she has just been doing collage art since the pandemic, I believe, and did it first as a form of like personal expression, and then has started documenting her process, and she makes a lot of incredible mixed media work, and she posts every day, here's my Dollar Tree store finds, or here's my
Mm,
tips and tricks to make baking utensils into paintbrushes, and all of that is
wow.
amazing and really, really interesting. And she's been doing a lot of that for free, and I'm going to join her Patreon as well and see what's happening over there, because she makes incredibly unique, really interesting work in a style I haven't seen anyone else be so successful at or quite do the way that she does. So I
Mm.
would love to um, be a bit more personal and direct like that. I think I really admire that a lot.
Because as like an outsider to like collage art and I guess art in
Mm,
general in many ways, like
mm,
I'm always really interested in at the minute at least like pre-production of stuff. I'm really interested in
mm,
like at what point does an idea become an image rather than the image itself because the image is cool, but
yeah,
like what is that weird process that nobody really sees and it's kind of hard to document before the image is
yeah.
created in terms of like okay you're an artist you're walking down the street you have an idea so what do you do with that? How does that materialize? I think for me right now in my life I'm kind of interested in that stage. So the idea of like
Mm,
sitting down with like say books and talking about why you chose them or but just talking about a piece of work and dissecting like each individual layer or like the elements of the work, something like that to me would be cool to listen to. Something that I'd be interested in personally.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's really cool you've said that. I will definitely think about it. Um, yeah, I've watched some sketchbook creators and
Mm,
painters and scrapbookers on YouTube just make a video of themselves creating a page. And I find
mm,
it really endearing and beautiful to just have a cup of coffee and watch one of those. I think
yeah.
they're great. And it does give you so much more of an insight into how that artist thinks and how their brain is connecting to the thing that they create. And that's true that we do miss a lot of that. Yeah. And it's the way to personally connect with your audience if you're an artist, and it's a way for your audience to understand you better.
So you work in a studio, which is a home studio.
A home studio, yeah.
So
It's my living room.
perfect.
But
That's
the
perfect.
dining table is my work table. My housemate and my partner are very forgiving of me because my crap is just everywhere. I did a big reorganize over the summer and it is a lot better. I don't have all of my stuff stacked up now in crates in the bedroom. I
Yeah,
figured out a way to store everything better.
yeah.
Um, and I have a much better Zoom background because before you could just see our whole living room and my work table, which just looks like a pile of paper trash, obviously, and all our kitchen. So now I feel a lot better being on camera now because I have a little bit of a better background.
You have a lot of
But
beautiful books behind you.
thank you so
That's why
much.
I've been looking at
Yes.
the Pixoplasm.
Oh
Pixoplasma. I've been
yeah,
looking at that since the start. That's the only chart I
it's
can read. I'm like, oh,
amazing.
that's so cool.
Yeah, I
I'll be googling that
recommend
later.
it. Yeah, it's
Um,
character. It's basically like modern character design by
oh,
illustrators and artists, and
that's cool.
yes, they're amazing. Yeah.
So the idea of the studio, the question of the those about studio. So a lot of artists
Yeah.
I've spoken to over the years, have spoken to about the idea of being lonely because they're working in a studio. I want to ask you, like,
Mm.
do you ever get lonely whilst working in a studio? And if so, how do you combat that loneliness?
I don't get lonely because for many reasons, I used to feel very isolated when I
Mm,
would create something, especially when I lived in London. I was just working from my little room and my housemates were super lovely and I could go talk to them anytime, but they weren't in the room while I was creating. I
mm,
mean, I would try and like create on the laptop while we were all like having dinner or watching TV, but it's like way too chaotic to focus on anything. I'm definitely a person that prefers um, I find it hard to like work in a coffee shop or whatever. I can do research or write emails and do admin and stuff in a coffee shop or a public place, but actually making work, I do use a lot of my brain to do that. So like I always like music or something in my ears. I sort of do like to be able to focus, and I have problems focusing if there's a lot going on around
mm.
me. But I have a partner who's a programmer and he works from home as well. So it's just the two of us here all the time. My housemate comes and goes. So he's just here all the time. And so if I have a difficult moment or I'm struggling or I need a break, we just have a cup of tea together, or I do a little rant or he does a little rant and we take it, and then you feel a lot better, I think I'm also it's really strange because when I did my illustration degree and also when I learned to do art, it was obviously at school and then at art school, where there was like anywhere between 30 and 60 people around you all the time, and you get used to people being around, and not just them being around, but especially on my degree course, it was encourage that people would come and walk past and tell you like what they thought about something. And if you didn't want that, you could work at home. So if you felt like, oh, I want to create in private, or I want to focus, you could do that at home. But being in the studio was encouraged and we could see each other create. And I definitely at the beginning of my career really missed that. I missed the camaraderie of
Mm.
knowing that there's a bunch of creative people being together. There is definitely a kind of energy you can get that like reverberates around a room when people are creating together, which is really lovely. But now I'm making a really persistent effort to learn a lot as I go. I'm not creating very casually. So it's really nice actually for me to be able to focus. And if anything, I prefer to work like at night, like late into the night when nobody WhatsApps me and it's very quiet outside and it's dark and I can't see anything and I'm just in my own, I can give
Yeah.
myself the permission to switch off the outside world and just do my own thing. Um, I think that creative loneliness happens when you don't have anyone to talk to about your work, or you don't have anyone to show about your work, or you're not getting any feedback. I mean, there's lots of reasons why it happens, but for me, when I'm not getting any feedback, and so the more I'm posting to Instagram, even if a piece doesn't do very well, I am like interacting with people.
Yeah.
The yeah, I and that's really valuable. So that kind of helps prevent me being lonely. I would love to have more artistic community offline, and I am like slowly getting into that more here, which is lovely. And I do like every couple of months I meet up with some lovely collage artists. And we've been making work together the last few months, and that's been really nice to just go do that occasionally. But yeah, I think I like to work alone. I prefer to work alone. At least that's the era I'm in right now. Who knows? There have been times where I really want to be around people when I'm working, so that could change again. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to realize that as an artist, there are going to be times where you're going to work alone, and it's most likely will be. It's kind of part of the process, but also a
Yeah,
lot of artists are quite introverted. So
yeah,
for a lot of people, it's not a problem. They don't have to be
yeah,
around a lot of people, and they prefer
yeah.
not to be around a lot of people whilst they're creating, especially
Mm.
because you're in that state where you just want to kind of just get on with things in your own way.
Yeah. I'm definitely an extrovert, but in order to create, I have to in order to really think about what I'm creating and create at my most effectively, I have to like shut down communication for an amount of time, and then I will like work super hyper focus for a few hours, and then come out of it and then just want to chill out, have coffee, have chats.
Hmm.
Even if no one is around or available to talk to, I'll get into a WhatsApp chat or an Instagram conversation or something. So the internet really helps to fill that gap. If it's 4 a.m., people in the US are still awake. So I just send some
Oh,
messages out, see
I'm
what
very
people are
aware of
doing.
that.
Yeah, exactly. It's really funny because I post like 6 p.m. my time on Instagram, and then it kind of the engagement tails off. And then I notice when Americans finish work at like 6, 7 p.m. their time, and I get like a little uptick, and I'm like, oh, that's so nice. I got a little bump.
That's
And
interesting.
it's funny how that comes in waves like that.
So, what has creating art taught you about yourself?
This is such a difficult question because I don't really know myself
Yeah.
before creating art. Like I
Yeah.
I I don't mean to say that I would ever start like a bio with, oh, I've been creating for such a young age and I've always drawn. That is interesting about people, but also most people do draw as kids.
Hmm.
But I mean, what I mean to say is I don't remember not wanting to make things
Yeah.
ever. I um My mum was extremely good at sitting down and making crafts with us, and she used to run an after school crafts club, and
Oh, wow.
sometimes we would make crafts with the kids all together. And so and she was also a dressmaker, so she would just make things, and I just made things because she made things, I guess, and
Hmm.
because I was really driven to and I wanted to. So I don't know, I guess it's really hard to separate what I've learned about myself from being an artist than what I've just learned myself about being
Hmm.
alive in the world generally.
I know
I would
that's
say,
a
yeah,
fair answer.
I would say, um, I would say I've learned that if I'm interested in something, that that it's always worth following up on that interest, like more widely, because in my practice, I've found if I find a nugget of interest in something, it's always worth writing it down and then seeing if it's worth making something out of it. And it almost always is. And in the real world as well, if I find a person interesting or something interesting about anywhere that I am, I try and follow up on that rather than like leave it hanging, which means that I'm always chasing a bunch of different things all the time and like trying to discover new things all the time. And I think it's taught me to do that. And but about myself, I don't know, that I'm just a person who wants to communicate and is fascinated by people and wants to communicate with people visually and in all different kinds of ways as well. I'm really interested in connection as a person, and that filters into my art, and then my wish to connect with people through my art filters into my personality. So I don't really know. It's a bit chicken and egg situation. Sometimes I think about like how I think about things, and I don't know which has come from what. And I think it's just often just a circle, you know.
Yeah.
I have learned that if I really put my mind to it, that I can create something that I really love, and that's a really powerful feeling that I don't know I would have had if I wasn't a visual artist or wasn't a creative person. That, you know, that's good to know about yourself. It's sort of it's the thing that I've created for myself that's always been there for me, no matter where I am, what city I'm living in, what connections I have, what relationships I have. And that is a sort of a resilience that I made this for myself. Obviously, like I had a lot of systemic help to do it. Like I went to art school, and I'm very lucky to have gone to art school, and I don't discount that at all. But it's my thing, you know, that I made for myself, and I'm really proud of it. So I guess it's that.
So I have a question for you from the last artist I interviewed. I think it's probably changed since I sent you the notes, actually, to be
Yeah, no
honest.
worries. Surprise
So this
me.
question is from a photographer called Andrew Wester. Absolutely lovely guy. And his question for you is there an art form that you've always dreamt of doing? And if so, what is it?
Ooh, I would love to make big three-dimensional, multifaceted sculptures with paper.
Oh,
I wouldn't want to move away from like working with paper, but I would love to hang different kinds of paper and photographs and collages from a ceiling and have them like cascade down in a much more three-dimensionally sculptural assemblage kind of a way. I also, I mean, I always under as an artist, you have this existential feeling where you're like, oh, I want to be a photographer, or I want to be a painter, or I want to make graphic novels. But I've had the opportunity to try a bunch of those things. So the thing that is a little bit more out of my reach is just large scale sculptural things that require a step ladder in a large room with nothing else in it. Because that's always the thing is, you know, I've never had a lot of space, so I would like to sort of expand into a space. That would be so exciting.
that's so interesting. And that's actually kind of funny because when you said about your small collages earlier, I was like, I'd hang them on the ceiling. So it's funny. You should
Yeah.
say that. I was
Well, it's
thinking like in a
because
spiral or something.
it's because I sort of it's not like that would be the opposite of what I'm doing now, but it's the other end of the spectrum. And I'm always interested in sort of not exactly the extremes of both ends, but like to see how working bigger would influence my smaller work and vice versa would be so interesting.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I'd be any good at it because I'm not very effective at thinking in 3 dimensions, but I for sure would learn a lot, and that would make it worth it.
Yeah, there are a few artists that I know that I'm going to send your way who
Please
do stuff that's kind of quite structural almost. A couple of people I've spoken to, a couple of people I just know of because their work is really amazing. There's a certain artist called J.R. Chuo who creates these really gorgeous, intricate paper pieces of like the coral reefs. His work is gorgeous, but he's definitely the kind of person who's like putting them in perspex and hanging them up. And he's one of these artists who was going to have such a good long big career. He's only like 21. He's gonna have like such a good career. He's one of those people that I got to meet him a few years ago at the other art fair in London. And it's just one of these phenomenal artists who every time I see his work, he's just doing something crazily cool and different. And I have so much respect for him. I'll send you a bunch of artists later anyway.
Yeah, please do. I'll be fascinated.
Do you have a question for the next person I interview?
I would say, how are you a person that has a million ideas? And if so, how do you decide which ones to make something from? Because that's my biggest struggle. And if someone has the answer, I'd love to know. But also, I just love to hear about how people's ideas become reality and how they choose which concepts they choose to develop and why.
Yeah. So I put here, are you a person who has a million different ideas? And if
Mm-hmm.
so, how do you choose one idea to pursue?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, that
And
again?
yeah, and if not, maybe how does that hyper focus benefit you? Because some people just
Oh,
don't have that many ideas and they're much, they choose one thing and they work on it for months. And I also have huge admiration for that kind of hyper focus as well. So I don't want people to feel like, oh, I'm not having enough ideas, because I think if you just have one incredible idea, that's worth 100 mediocre ideas, you know?
so next question for you is then, can anybody be an artist?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Anyone can be an artist. Um, it depends what that means to you. Can
Hmm.
anyone be a successful artist? No. But also, what does success mean? But yes,
Hmm.
anyone can be an artist. Everybody should be an artist. Everyone should make things. I think if you're making things, you're an artist. Like if someone tells me what they're making is art, I'm like, yeah, okay, you're an artist then. You know, you don't have. It's like singing or drawing or running. There's no. You don't have to have. You know, it's not like being a doctor. You know.
Yeah, like, it's
Yeah,
accessible to
100%.
everybody.
Yeah, everybody.
Which is funny because my next question was, what does it mean to be a successful artist?
I
In your
mean
opinion?
different things to different people. In my opinion, success is being able to pay my rent and my bills, and also learning and growing all the time. So I've been in positions where I've been in corporate design and I've been able to pay my rent and my bills, but I haven't been learning. I've been really stagnant and kind of at the edge of burning out, because you're like churning out, as I said before, like stuff from corporate style guys or whatever. And so it's really important to me to experiment and learn and grow, but it is also, you got to finance your life as well. So a balance
Right.
of those two. I love when people like and respond to my work, but I'm not really interested in numbers.
Hmm.
In that, obviously, when you have a piece that gets a bunch of engagement on Instagram or whatever, that is a very nice feeling. But I would rather have a small community that are more interested
Hmm.
in my stuff than like a large community of people who are like not
Passive.
really bothered. Yeah.
Because I think
Yeah.
that's the thing. I think you'd rather have five people who ask you about the work than 15
Yeah.
people who like the work.
And to be honest, something that's the most difficult thing, I think, for artists when you're trying to just be an artist and make personal work and sell it however you can, is that your community online is other artists
Hmm.
until you
Yeah.
break out of that. We are all each other's community, and that's wonderful, because those are the people that I want to hear from, and I value their thoughts and what they think, because they're also creators. But also, most of us don't have that much expendable income to
Yeah.
buy each
Yeah.
other's work.
Yeah. That's
So
a
then
really
you
good
need to
point.
find
That's a really good point.
galleries and collectors and break out of your
Hmm.
sweet creative little bubble. So I know I need to do that a bit more, but
Yeah. That's a
I'll
really good point.
definitely keep my community. Yeah.
It's a good point because it's like you don't want to sacrifice your community for the commerce, but at the same
No.
time you also want to make money from what you do because it's
Yeah.
time. Money is time, as
No,
most people say.
totally. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a really good point,
So,
actually.
mm,
So I'm going to think about that now because, like, when you see all these really cool artists who have got really big numbers, you're like, well, actually, how much of that is just actually other artists, and how much of that is that people actually buying
yeah,
their work?
and how much of that feels like success to them, or how
Mm,
much of that is even monetizable?
mm,
Because increasingly you used to be able to have 30,000 Instagram followers and have a Facebook shop and make a living that's not possible anymore. People are not buying like that anymore.
Hmm.
So I've seen a lot of artists with like big followings just abandon their accounts altogether and go back to full-time non-creative work or full-time creative work or change course completely because what they used to do to finance their lives just isn't working anymore. So you just have to be prepared to do a quick switch at any time.
And not just
You have to
that,
be really adaptable. Yeah.
not just that. I think also what I've definitely learned over the years is that the more people you have in a community, the more people you have to spend time talking to, and the more
Yeah.
consuming it can be. For particularly if you're not a person who talks a lot, or if you're not a person who has the
Yeah.
time to be able to communicate with everybody all the time, 24/7.
Yeah.
I think that's also a thing. You have to be very considerate with your time and your connections and who you're
Yeah.
talking to. But at the same time, you
Just
don't want to
like,
just not do. You don't want to like ignore people either.
yeah. Occasionally at the beginning of like the US school year or at the end of the UK one, I'll get like students dropping into my DMs being like, "Hey, I like your work. Do you want to like talk to me about it for my personal project?" And I accept some of those
Yeah.
depending on the message and who's sending it. But sometimes I'm like, that is work for me though. And I had other plans
Yeah.
right up until
Can't.
January or
Yeah, you can't.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I just send them a bio and some advice, but I wouldn't sit down and do an interview like this probably.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, not at all. But that's a completely different thing. It's like, you know, they're not making a podcast and also they're like 16 or 15 or, you know, I love to chat with them, but it's not worth taking every request. I don't mean to say that there's people always in my DMs asking me to do things.
No,
That's
but I
not
know
true.
what you mean.
But I just mean to say that like, in as much as, you have to be conscious about where you're spending, not just your time, but your energy.
Yes.
And answering emails is part of the job, and it's my least favorite, and it's the one that takes the most out of me. And I find it hard to explain to people that making the art is the easy part. It's the business thing that I find very difficult. And I think that's common to a lot of us, you know.
Yeah, that really is. Right, I have two more questions for you, so we'll wrap things up very briefly. So the second to last question is, what will your younger self think about your work?
Think about my work?
Yes.
I think my younger self would wish that I was doing things a bit more experimentally and being a bit more crazy, but otherwise would be pretty happy. I definitely used to want to be like a bit noisier, like make a bit more of a visible impact. And more recently, I'm a lot more happy to make small things in the quiet, I guess. I find more fulfilling. And myself in my teens and 20s, I definitely, you know, I want to be splashing paint all over billboards and being super punk about everything. But you can be super punk in a cozy way, and I guess that's what I'm doing now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it, to be fair. And also it's nice because you've also figured out how you like to work.
Yeah.
You know, what is like a suitable
what
is like a suitable
when I'm in my 60s, I might be wanting to be out on the town all the time, networking, never stopping, doing huge canvases, splashing paint on gallery walls, and generally making trouble. And I will leave space for that, for myself, future self, to do that if I need to, for sure, if I can.
What I love is how adaptable you are and how much you're thinking about, actually, I have to be adaptable. I think that's actually really, really helpful. I think that's what's going to help you have a very long career.
Yeah. Yeah. You really have to. I mean, also, most of the artists I know either are doing other jobs or have done other jobs or know that they might have to do other jobs in the future. Designers too. And I tended enough bars and worked enough restaurants and worked in enough hotels to know that I'm just so lucky to be here right now, being a designer right now. I don't want to go back to like waiting tables, but I could do that. I'm not bad at it, you know. It's fine. I'm so lucky to be able to not have to do that right now. There's also nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. It's like can be really rewarding. But yeah.
So the last question, double barrel question, which is, what are you currently working on, and where can people find more about you and your work?
I am finishing up the last 7 days of Collectober because I'm a week behind. So I'm gonna try and post every day until I think I'm like 8 days behind until the 8th of November. I'm then gonna turn those into a zine, and the most successful of those are gonna be t-shirts. which I'm going to launch in my online store for Black Friday, which I hate, but support independent creators on Black Friday. That's what I do. Anything that I was going to spend, I just send to people whose work I love. So if anybody, I guess that's in November. And then next year, my Patreon will be launched. And for that, I have got together a bunch of amazing materials for collage packs. So everybody will get like an incredible collage pack with some advice, some basic advice about cutting and sticking and gluing, and some like maybe some poetry prompts or something like that. Or I might just send people amazing materials, and those will go out seasonally in January, April, August, and October. And they'll be full of like seasonal goodies, like lots of vintage materials, lots of ephemera, anything that I can find right around my neighborhood that I think will be really cool. Wow. And then lots of other resources as well on my Patreon, and that's patreon.com/collagecult, but cult with a V. You can follow me on Instagram at instagram.com/Jenny Ariane, which is JENNYARIANE. And or if you search Jenny Lloyd, you'll find me. And you can buy my work at collagecult.co. I'm around. DM me. Yeah. My DMs are open. I love to chat.
That's perfect. Jenny, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Aaron. This has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much.
That concludes my conversation with artist Jenny Lloyd. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments about it, please send me an email over at theflyingfruitbowl@gmail.com. Get in touch via social media sites such as Twitter and Instagram. The Flying Fruit Bowl podcast can be found on a variety of sites, such as Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Music. If you like the show, please consider rating, reviewing, sharing, or subscribing on any of those platforms to help spread the word. Also, please check out theflyingfruitbowl.co.uk for daily art inspiration, and if you're a creative, please get in touch for a chance to be featured or interviewed. The Flying Fruit Bowl also now has a Patreon page. Tiers start from £1 a month, and if you're interested in joining, please head on over to patreon.com/theflyingfruitbowl. Additionally, we also have a PayPal for one-time donations. All donations go to the running costs of the site, and I would greatly appreciate it. I'll include a link to our PayPal in the show notes. Once again, folks, thank you very much for listening, and until next time, please stay safe.